Hello, and thank you for joining us on this Saturday for Prison Foundation's second episode of Chat Time. We want to wish everyone a happy Pride, and we hope you're out there celebrating. More importantly, we understand that this is the fifth anniversary of the Pulse nightclub shooting. So we also need to understand that we must keep fighting and keep talking. That is why the Prison Foundation came up with these conversational chats through Prison Foundation's Chat Time. We hope to cover topics that pertain to the API LGBTQ community, and through these conversations, spark change. That is why today our topic is about intergenerational stories. We've had the privilege of working with leaders that have spanned a lifetime of advocacy work, as well as college students who are doing work today. We hope that through their stories and experiences that you hear today, that you'll be inspired to create change. And we also hope that you'll join us in future chat times by joining us on social media by following Prism QTAPI. It is my privilege to introduce our moderator for this chat time, Clara Yoon, the founder of API Rainbow Parents in New York City. Thank you and enjoy.
Hello, everyone. Happy Pride. Thank you, Jonathan, for this amazing introduction. So my name is Clara. I go by she, her, hers, and I'm part of the API Rainbow Parents of People New York City. And I'm also on the board of a Prism Foundation. So we have two amazing guest speakers with us today. And we are going to talk about our intergenerational conversation, our struggle, and what are the ways that we can work together across generations to get the work that we need to do. And with that, I'm going to have each one of us go around and introduce ourselves. We're going to say name, our pronoun, and where we work, what are the work that we do, and how we celebrate the Pride Month. So with that, I'm going to ask Crystal to start. Crystal, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Happy Pride. My name is Crystal J, and I go by the pronouns she, her, ta, and a proud community auntie. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm part of API QT, which is Asian Pacific Islander Queer Women's Transgender Community, as well as Red Envelope Giving Circle, which is a philanthropic circle founded by API Queer Elders, as well as QTAPI. How do I celebrate Pride? Well, I start by celebrating with my family, but definitely tonight I'm going to the ballpark to celebrate Pride with the San Francisco Giants at the ballpark, and actually doing with the frame line. So that's an exciting event tonight. I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Crystal. Seth?
Yes, hi, my name is Seth Canada. I am a college student. I use he, him pronouns. I am going to the Georgetown University, or virtually. So now I get to travel all around the country. I'm currently in California, although my school, Georgetown University, is in Washington, D.C. But aside from being a student, I am also the founder of Transgender Resiliency, a Farming News Source, which is soon to be launched website for positive news about trans people, written by trans people. And through that site, I am going to be training the next generation of transgender journalists to be able to cover trans issues with competence and sensitivity to these issues. Well, with that, the way I'm celebrating Pride is that by not celebrating with the mainstream organizations that are largely white, cisgender, gays, and lesbians. So I celebrate on my own with doing a lot of accomplishing a lot of things, and also working on this trans website to be able to get it launched by August.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I'm going to put in the chat this link to the site.
we'll definitely share that to broadly to other people. And I guess that same goes to Crystal. So as we wrap up this conversation, we want to share some of the work that you do more broadly. And it's just amazing for Crystal and Seth to have you all with us today so that we can talk about the intergenerational conversation. It's interesting that Seth, you are college student, right, in your maybe 20s, and Crystal, you have been working for the community for past so many years. And the next question that I have is like, I wanted to get to know both of you a little more in depth or more personal level. Like, what was it like when you were growing up? What is your background? And how did your family communicate with each other across generation? And before I do that, I actually wanted to introduce myself a little bit more. So I am Korean American. I came to United States when I was 13 years old, and I'm in my 50s. You know, there's no shame in getting old, right? I'm embracing my being a mature woman with letting my white hair grow, right? But I grew up in a very large extended family and very traditional way, and there was a certain things that I wasn't allowed to talk about or share my feelings, and I don't really remember having a very like a personal conversation, an important conversation with my family members. It was always like superficial. And I do have a son who is he's 25 years old, and he identifies himself as a bisexual, queer, with a transgender experience. And that's how I got to know the community, and that's how I got to be here. And I am so excited to hear from Seth and Crystal about your own upbringing and your own experience. So, Crystal, can I go with you first?
Hi, I am a fourth generation Chinese American, third generation San Franciscan. My mother is still alive. She's 102 years old this year. So we have some long genes going on here. I grew up in San Francisco, born and raised in San Francisco, came out at the age of 13. I'm going to be approaching my 75th year this year, so three quarters of a century. And coming out at 13 means that I've been around for quite a long time in and around discovering and processing my queer identity. I identify as a lesbian, which is sometimes people think it's an outdated term, but I fought very hard to get that term and to be proud of that term myself. So basically, I've been involved in community since I was coming out. Coming out to my classmates at the age of 13 was a difficult pathway, but somehow they were very kind to me. They didn't, there was no violence, outward violence or anything like that, but I definitely knew that I was different. My communication with my parents, we didn't really talk about it that much, but I think what happened was race was primary because we were growing up in Chinatown, San Francisco, but we really had to battle a lot of discrimination. My parents were college educated, yet they weren't able to pursue their own professions as a scientist or as a optometrist because of discrimination. And so that was primary in my growing up. And I didn't embrace my really queer identity until I was about 21, and then didn't embrace my API queer identity until I was about 30. So this has been a long journey, and I'm really still going on it. And now I'm embracing my elderhood, which is really exciting, and really hope to continue to work a lot with across the generations to continue our fight.
Thank you. That's amazing story, Seth?
Yeah, so I am a first generation immigrant. I came from Burma, Myanmar, in the year 2000. And that's when I, for the first time, started college here in the US. So I'm, so I know I look 20, but I'm not. A little bit older than that. So it's the Asian thing. So there was a gap of about 15 or maybe a little more than that. 15 years of not going to school because I was working in restaurants to be able to first make ends meet and also to try to return to school. And so that only happened recently. And in the year 2000, I'm now at Georgetown University. So yes, I also have some gray hair, not from age. Obviously, it's not showing on my face. So that's from a lot of stress that from my life experiences. Uh, a trans person in the DC area, struggling with housing situations and different things. And so that's all the gray hairs from all the stress and trauma caused by life situations and injustices I endure. But yeah, so as for growing up, so my family, we don't have like really established like gender roles. So my mother, before getting married, because she was so smart, out of the 11 children, so parents spoiled her, and she was just riding bicycle rounds and never learned to cook at all. And so when she got married, my father was the one cooking, and he did that mostly. And then she was the breadwinner. So we had, different view of, obviously different view of gender. And then she was the one also that who went to Saudi Arabia to work about 8 years to save up money so that I could come to the US with a student visa because of the sponsorship required for getting that such visa. So that's how my family looked at gender. And I used to I also learned how to cook at age 11. So when my mother did start to cook a little bit, and I couldn't eat by the time I was 11 already. So I started to cook for myself, and my brother learned how to cook before I did because he was the older sibling. So. And then I was climbing coconut trees and mango trees that we have in the yard to eat from the trees. So that's what my upbringing was like.
Wow, that sounds really interesting, and thank you for sharing that. And it just remind me how although we use this word API, right? There are just so much of differences and rich experience and lived experience that we all have. And Crystal, I really admire how when you mentioned that you embrace this API queer lesbian identity in your 30s, that is just amazing. And I think there's a reason why it took you so long. And I would think that the racism also plays some role in that regard. Is there anything else that you want to talk about around your upbringing and?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the racism in the queer community was even, I would say, shocking to me because I thought I would be in a safe space when coming out as a lesbian. But I found that even though part of it was safe, I could not embrace being queer and Asian at the same time because there was a lot of stereotyping that was going on. There's a lot of discrimination. We were treated differently. We were treated as other, as we were treated as other being Asian in traditional communities. I grew up in Chinatown, and definitely there was a dividing line there where we couldn't cross. We were a 10 square block. You could be Chinese and you could be who you are in a very tight community. You could be exceed to be anything you wanted, but once you crossed that line, which was in Chinatown, it was the Broadway line, you went into North Beach. And my mother happened to be brave enough to have their first business in North Beach, Chinese business in North Beach, as an optometrist, because that's where she could get a job. She waited until the North Beach optometrist died, and then they didn't have anybody. And he was Italian, so she had the courage to cross the line and set up shop. And actually, she was embraced there as an optometrist. But still, when we crossed over into that neighborhood, we were beat up, we were spat upon, we were called names. So again, race was the primary thing, the discrimination, and coming out as queer, and then trying to go to the Castro or anything else, that we were also discriminated against as Asians. So that was when I knew that my work had to be not just as fight for API rights, but also as being API and queer, which is an integration of intersection of identity. That's been my life work, probably, being a teacher as well, but fighting for that, and they're all connected. And that's the thing that I've taken throughout my life, was that all of this is connected. You cannot separate yourself out anywhere, everything's connected.
I totally agree with you. And one thing that I have learned in my work is that in order for us to understand ourselves and our prior generation, we do need to understand the history. We do need to understand where our prior generation come from. Even within this whole LGBTQ activism work, equality work that we do, we are actually standing the shoulders of others who came before us. There were others who have paved the way, and that helped us to get to where we are. And I really commend you, Crystal, for being the elder of this community. I remember you mentioning that you have some name, like a different name. You're an auntie.
Oh, community auntie?
Yes. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Who gave you
Well,
that name?
Well, actually, I started to embrace that because so many people, there were so many of the younger generation who were not embraced by their families, and so I started working with API QC and APINC, Asian, API equality in Northern California. And I loved and was inspired by the younger generation, but I knew that a lot of them had a really hard time. So we did a lot of talking to each other, listening with each other, and having conversations to sort of bridge that gap. But then I really realized that just being my own experience and having gone through that, the traumas of not belonging or not being accepted, but I came through it, and I was able to succeed and also to be inspired by the young people, that I could be a role model for them, not a role model, but sort of like be their auntie. And basically people started calling me auntie, and auntie is certainly a sign of respect, and especially in the API culture, across the board. And I love that people considered me their auntie, and that I could be like an elder to them, and to be able to embrace them and love them for who they are.
Thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to go into our next question. So today's topic is about intergenerational conversation, intergenerational story. So tell us why this intergenerational conversation is important to you in the community organizing that you do, either in personal level. So I'm going to start with Seth.
Yes, I think the intergenerational conversation is important because every generation they learn something or a lot of things from previous generations, and also they leave something behind, or they teach currently to the younger generation. So, and there were things that passed down from my mother to me. Like I'm good at a lot of things that I wouldn't have learned on my own. And besides teaching, the cooking, I learned on my own. She couldn't teach me how to cook. Uh, that, but a lot of things like I'm starting to clean the way my mother knows how to clean the house and stuff, and that I learned from her. And a lot of things I'm good with, like shopping for discounts and stuff. And then now, because I'm not as young as typical college students, so in my classes there will be people like my age as well, and there will be some younger people so different and then teachers, obviously most of them are older generations, and we're teaching each other different stuff and having different compositions around different stuff. And then currently I'm taking a class at Georgetown, again module, and it's about gender and the law, and the teachers are so excited to have me because I was imagine that a lot of classmates, some of them are younger than me, and also probably everybody else is a cis gender person. So she's excited to have learn about my personal story, as well as asking me to send her like any information that that I think that the classmates should read and learn from about this gender issues. So I'm kind of excited about that, to be able to also share my knowledge with other people, and that's kind of great. And so I will be like I've been having conversation with my mother since like the last um, since about 2017, and so we've been going back and forth with this whole educating about gender thing. And so it doesn't seem like the conversation, I have to keep that conversation going, because they'll like I be explaining to her like these are people's pronouns, and this is how they identify, and these people use they pronoun because they don't identify either male or female, because they don't like the idea that somebody has to fall into this box or that box, and they don't like that. And so that's why these people are gender non-binary, and then there are also people who are trans. And so it seems that I'm telling her quite a lot of things, and sometimes I have to kind of constantly remind her as well. So yeah, so the conversation, like it and sometimes I'm glad that she asks different questions, and then I'm happy to answer additional questions that relate to this whole thing. So I think that the conversations are important, because how else is someone else going to learn that they don't personally experience? So
Yes, yes, I agree with that. I met a lot of other, for myself, when my son came out about 10, 11 years ago, I had to do a lot of learning, and I also had to do a lot of unlearning of the things that kind of prevented me from understanding my son, his gender identity, his sexual orientation. So those are the struggles that many parents go through. And it's because of many of us did not have that exposure, and it wasn't brought up, interacting or knowing other LGBTQ people. So Seth, thank you so much for your time and effort to talk with your mother, so that she can understand and she can have a better relationship with you. Thank you so much for doing that. I want to turn to Crystal to ask, what are the challenges? Why this intergenerational conversation is so important to you and the community organizing that you do?
Well, definitely, the intergenerational conversation started way before. And as I was growing up, I was very close to my grandmother, and it wasn't. And even though we didn't have conversations, we sat silently and shared a lot of experiences at the table or experiences in life. And it wasn't until later, she was one of the first women who came over as a merchant bride in Chinatown. And I didn't realize, I mean, I sat with her for many years and didn't understand why. And she was a great presence to me. And she was strong and she was beautiful. And yet I didn't realize why she didn't walk very much. And then it wasn't until later on that I knew that she had bound feet, and yet with her bound feet, she was able to raise a family, even though her husband had died early. She was able to send her children were able to go to college. She was able to buy property, even though she was not able as an Asian woman to buy property. She managed to do it somehow. She actually sold opium in the old days. And my father was a runner for distilled liquor, illegal liquor in Chinatown. But those are the types of stories where when I found out about them, that she was able to survive all of this, regardless of all the challenges that she had. So it had to inspire me. Those are the inspirations that I have from her and my mother, who was like the very first in her as a Chinese woman to graduate, one of the first to graduate from optometry school, where there were no she had to cross the bay every day in a ferry because there was no BART, no bridge, nothing to go to school. But those challenges that they have and the obstacles that they were able to cross gave me the sort of the inspiration to do the same thing, because whatever I would face was just minimal compared to what they would face. And I'm hoping the things that I went through, I can pass on to the next generation, because it's happened for many, many, many generations before me and us. There were people who were silently doing things that helped us become so we could be our own authentic selves. And now the conversations I have with younger people is that sometimes, as we have been fighting our whole lives for generations for all sorts of causes, we get tired. And at 75, sometimes we get sort of tired about, and how can we continue, because we seem to keep recycling some of the struggles that we have right now, as we see against the trans community, against the queer community, against women, against the laws that are popping up against people of color. And this is something we thought we already succeeded about, but no, we're going backwards. So I am definitely inspired by the youth, like Seth, and the youth who are continuing on and who see the world a different way, who can use the skills, their tech skills, the knowledge that we may pass on. And they definitely inspire me to continue, because I know that the future is worth it, that we need to continue to make sure that all of us have a place where we can be our authentic selves. So that generation conversation goes back and forth, and it's definitely helpful to empower all of us.
Thank you, Crystal. Now, one of the things that I heard from somewhere is that sometimes we learn things, right? We whether it's a culture, whether it's our upbringing, so there are value systems that has been instilled in us, and many times the parents do not accept their children for the first time and actually ask them not to come out, or ask them, to go back to the closet, or asking them, some hurtful questions. Hey, are you sure? And I was reminded that, and I think same thing happened to me, was because we thought our kids should live the life that we were taught as a happy life or the successful life. And I think there are some trauma that our older generation has gone through, and based on that trauma, they are actually raising us and asking us to do the certain things. But in fact, it is also causing additional trauma, right, for the next generation. And there are challenges, right, when we are trying to really have the conversation with our elders on the certain topics. So, for example, recent Black Lives Matter topics. I mean, not to mention the LGBTQ topics around like gender and gender stereotyping and expectation. But Black Lives Matter, and there are many Asian families who support Trump. Now, how do we go about, right? So these are the challenges that I can think of. But I'm sure Crystal and Seth, you probably have some challenges that you must have faced. And what do you do? Like, how do you overcome that challenges so that you can move forward with the work that you need to do? So let me ask Seth first.
So I, with my mother, I use sometimes some humors, and I read something about someone else's experience about. So there was a family gathering, Christmas or holidays, whatever that was, and this person talks about whenever the parents, the older generation, will like misgender the person trans sister or trans sibling, then they will like blow the horn. So each time of misgendering, they keep doing that, and eventually that's in hope that that way the parents will learn. Every time they misgender the child, they get called out instantly, and so that I think that was funny. So that's what I do with my mother. I told her, if you don't get my pronouns right, and then that's what I'm gonna be. I'm gonna do something like that. Others will not, geographically close, at the moment. So that's one thing, and also, so with the website transgender resiliency, a farming news source, what's gonna happen is, I'm gonna be trying to train the next generation of journalists who also trans people and non-binary people. So there's gonna be, so when I started college, it was journalism had a good reputation at the time. So that was many years ago, and the golden age, that was golden age of journalism at some point. And then over the last 2 decades, journalism has lost the public's trust, and mainly because they want to balance the facts with the bias. So instead of fact checking if this person saying that the truth, and if it's factually correct, instead of doing that, they balance it with another person's opinions, which completely will undo what the first person just said. So they think that's like they think that by doing that, they think they're being unbiased, and which is completely missing the point. Instead of they cover up the laziness or being short on time because of online journalism being more widely shared on social media, and then it's just so much more easily accessible to a lot of people. And because of that, they just want to rush and then hit publish and that's all they want to do, more or less. So that's why it has lost the public trust. So that's when I was, before these things start to happen, I was trained by teachers who actually did work in the mainstream media outlets with good reputation, like Pittsburgh Post-Gazette newspaper. And so they will teach me a lot of ethical things that journalists are supposed to be bound by. So my generation is like different things from these younger generations who are trying to be journalists. And so there's gonna be some challenges of what is the responsibility of a journalist, and what things that they're not supposed to be doing. So I hope to have like a lot of deep and long conversations with the younger generations. But hopefully, luckily though, with my experience, particularly with the students, journalism students who are working for the Georgetown student newspaper, they are very good with the asking people, even like asking people the pronouns, not just the name when they interview a person for the news story. So which is really cool. And then because they don't want to have, obviously nobody wants to have to go back and then change the pronouns of the person they just published about, and then because of the complaint. So that's really good. So there's something good about the newer generations who are more sensitive to like people's pronouns and gender issues.
So I'm hearing the education, right? So those are the challenges that we can. There are challenges of the things that has happened, right? And we need to educate each other, and we need to learn from each other. That's what I'm hearing. So, Crystal, what are your thoughts? What are the challenges that you face, and how do you go about it?
Definitely, the big challenges is technology. I mean, it took forever for me to figure out, and I'm still trying to figure these things out, as to how even to log into Zoom sometimes. And one of the things that I've learned to do was definitely not be afraid to ask for help. Definitely I'm lucky I have a daughter who is part of the younger generation and who's my tech person, and she happens to be here because of COVID. So I've been able to learn a lot from her. As we saw the other day, just see where is the button to turn this thing on. So technology is a big thing for me, and especially since COVID. And it's been, in a way, the one gift I can take away from that is that I've been forced to do it, to be able to work with it. When you talk about the Twitter or Twist, or I don't even know what that is. They said we were going live on Tweak or Twist or whatever it was. I had no idea what that meant. I know what Facebook is, but I had no idea what that meant. So asking those questions and being patient and trying to figure out what to do about that, that's a real big challenge. The other thing is language, common language, because for us, like I said, I grew up and fought very hard to be able to use the term lesbian, Asian Pacific Southern lesbian. Now it's considered a term that is outdated in terms of gender identity or sexual orientation identity. So I've had to learn a lot about the correct terminology to use, and not be afraid to ask questions. Luckily, I have very good friend Amy Tsuyoshi, who's the dean of ethnic studies at Arizona State. And if I ever had any questions about what does cisgender mean, what is identity, what does this mean, what is sex, does it mean to be binary, non-binary, I have learned those things. And I think what happens is that we are taught that the new generation may use these terms, but as elders, we're scrambling around to figure out what they mean sometimes. So I think the conversations that we need to have is just say, hey, please, let me not be afraid to ask a question. I'm not asking a question because I want to be disrespectful. It's just because I want to learn. And I think it needs to go both ways. And sometimes I think for the older generation, it's hard to enter some of the meetings and even just say, my name is such and such, and I go by she, her. That's a foreign concept for people. Definitely in my generations, I find that many in my generation don't even want to come to meetings or gather where they have to, because they don't know how to do it. It's not that they don't want to, they don't want to learn, but they're afraid. They're afraid of being perceived as old-fashioned or people that are not up with the times. So I think that's a big challenge for my generation. And what I hope to do is to bring I want to work hard to bring the generations together, to have these intergenerational conversations, and to have a safe space for generations to ask questions and not be fearful of asking questions, and to have the younger generations understand that to be patient a little bit, that we need to have patience with the dialogue.
Well, that's beautifully said, Crystal. And I do have I work with a parent who have LGBTQ children, and some of them are in their 60s, 70s, right? And for them, the challenges are basically around the conflict that they feel between the way that they were brought up, the way that they were thinking about gender as a binary, one or the other. Now we are talking about spectrum, right? There's gender is a spectrum. The sexual orientation is a spectrum. And for many parents who thinks that it's either one or the other, or black and white, right? They're really struggling to grasp that ideas. But the one thing about the parents is that because it's their children, they really want to know. All they want is a happiness for their kids, right? So eventually they come around. It took me 1 year for me to come around and start supporting my son. Now, another challenge that they face is the accessibility to the language, the resources in their own language, because many of them are not really proficient in English, or sometimes even if they are bilingual, seeing something in their own language makes a huge difference. It makes it real. So we are working hard to create those resources, existing resources, and translating them into the multiple languages, Asian languages. So those are the things that we are, me as a organizer do for other parents. But I love, Krista, how you pointed out for older generation to ask a lot of questions, be curious and willing to learn, and then the younger generation to have a more patience, right? And I think that also applies to some of the work that I do with our parents. I want to go into, I'm being mindful about the time that we have left. This has been an amazing conversation. I'm going to skip this question, but I want to get to ask you, while you are doing all this work, how do you set the boundary, right? There's only so much the younger generation can practice their patience, right? Or there's a frustration of asking too much questions, right? So how do we, as we are doing this work, and others who are doing the work to promote this intergenerational conversation, because it's really good for us to have it and empower us, how do we set the boundary and how do we do the self-care? Crystal, do you want to go first?
What boundaries?
What boundaries?
I mean,
so let's talk about boundaries, right? So that's a new concept to you, right? When people say, "Oh, I gotta set the boundary," right?
Absolutely. I think it's been very difficult. I mean, like I said, you cannot separate. It's been very difficult for me to separate the work that I do in community with the family. I mean, it is all interrelated because what we do in community is what we do in family as well. And everything that I've been doing, intentional or not intentionally, has been intentional, because I feel like what you need to change you need to change and look at yourself in order to be able to change in the community. I can't separate it. And that has been a problem sometimes, because if you're processing it all the time and you're trying to, it's ever changing every day, and we are changing so quickly in our lives. I mean, when we were growing up, it's pretty slow, you know. we would change things pretty slow, but now things shift so quickly with social media, with the conversations, with the way things are. Everything shifts in a millisecond. Your conversation, your language. So it's been difficult, and I'm not sure I'm not the best person to ask about boundaries because it's really been difficult for me.
Before I pass to Seth, I want to make sure that we are open for the Q&A a little later before we close before we end this event. So if anyone out there who's listening to us, you can ask us the questions, and then or either myself, Crystal, or Seth will be happy to answer that. So Seth, I'm going to pass to you. So how do you set the boundary? Crystal and I would like to know.
I guess I'm not very good at setting boundaries much at all.
Oh my goodness.
So, you know, some people need a lot more than education, I think. So part of the reason is because they think they know, and that's when the problem occurs. Because I can give you an example of how my lawyers handle the legal case I had in DC against a housing provider that denied me housing, specifically mentioning in an email that's because of my transness. And so one is the fact that they think that they could get away, and they think that they could just email that to me with the reason why was it struck it struck me. And then so eventually the back and forth of me trying to assert my right, getting what I'm entitled to, the housing that the organization provides to job seekers, because you can't, you can't pay rent when you don't have a job, but and then you can't work if you don't have a place to live, and that's just simple. That is just a vicious circle. And so that so the approach was to be somewhere like housed comfortably enough that you can could work, and then eventually save up money and pay rent. And that's how that's supposed to work. But it didn't turn out that way, because only because I'm not a cisgender person. And so that issue ended up in a lawsuit. And then there was lawyers who think they were competent enough to take on this case. And my personal experience told me otherwise. And so there was this opposing counsels mentioning, oh, I checked these boxes, which is so I wrote a blog post about this. I'm currently an intern with the Free State Justice, which is a LGBT advocacy organization who also provide direct legal services representation to LGBT individuals who are also at low income. And so I write an intern, I write blog posts about how stressing the importance of having a lawyer who is competent and who understands what you're going through. Not just what happened that brought you to this legal case against people that discriminate against you, but what other things that you're going through in your life, and other things to learn from the client. So in the blog post, I said, these opposing counsels were mentioning about the boxes I check off during the intake for the housing. And those are equatable to questioning a Black person, that why do you check off non-Hispanic, Latinx, Black on one form, and why do you check off African or African American on another form? It's the same thing. All the boxes I check, they all represent who I am. And why is it even a question? And then, my lawyers were not competent enough to say why is it no one needs to explain the agenda. And that's it. And so so I'm not too good with boundaries like that. Say it's been like, oh, you're not competent enough to represent me. So now maybe it's time. Maybe I should just look for another lawyer. It should have been like. But I just went with them until to the end, and now I write how your lawyers can re-traumatize you, instead of people who are actually supposed to help you re-traumatizing you and have you relive the same kind of prejudices that you face daily with because of this case or outside of this case, in your daily life. And so I need to work on setting boundaries, and I think I'm gonna do it well when I finally have that trans website launched, and be able to say this will be my platform to also educate people about these issues. That when somebody thinks that they know it all, and that's when everything gets screwed up.
Seth, thank you so much for all the details that you just gave us, because it reminded me, being able to set the boundary basically is a privilege, right? It reminded me that my son and myself, we were actually we got really closer because we started practicing setting the boundary and respecting each other's boundary. But then it was possible only because we developed trust, and we basically had that privilege to be able to do that, right? So I'm hearing from Seth and Crystal that although you are not able to set the boundary at this given moment, I do hope that you both do self-care, because what you're doing is just amazing work, and it's going to make the life of our future LGBTQ generation lives easier, and it's going to help make this world safer for anyone, including my son. So I'm just so grateful for work that you are doing. So we have a couple of minutes left, and it doesn't sound like that we have any questions from the audience. I think they're missing out a lot. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Seth and Crystal for anything that you wanted to share as we're wrapping up, as a final word. If you feel that, oh, I just have to tell this, please do. So Crystal, can I go with you first? Your final statement, final words.
I would say my final word was just to be open and generous with your time, and to keep the avenue of communications open. between all the generations, to listen to each other's stories and to tell stories of your own generation. And we need more time to have face-to-face conversations, not just political conversations, but personal conversations about our joys and about our lives and about our successes, our failures, and not be afraid to ask questions, and to not necessarily having answers, but just being supportive and to listen, and to see that, and then we'll know that we have so much more in common than we do, because we are all striving to create this safe world for all of us, so that we can become our own authentic self, and no matter who we are. And I guess that's all I can say for now.
That's amazing. That is you wrapped it up so nicely. Thank you so much for being with us. Seth, any final words?
I'm just gonna say real quick. So don't let other people's hate get in your way of achieving your fullest potential. And there's our plight. With our plight comes our pride, and so there is no rainbow without us the trans and non-binary people. So it's supposed to, the T shouldn't be left out of the pride, the whole LGBT thing. And so that's it.
Thank you. And for me, if anyone is watching, and if you are part of the LGBTQ community, I want to let you know that you are loving, you are lovable, and you are being loved. And I want to make sure that you celebrate yourself, no matter what you are. And same thing to Crystal, and I want to say the same thing to Seth. And I just wanted to wish everyone a happy Pride. So we're gonna wrap up, and Crystal, please make sure to send us the link to your work that you are doing, the organization that you're running and you're supporting, and Seth, same to you. So we have a Jonathan and Bao who are supporting us in the back end from technical perspective. So they're going to share those links to broader community. All right. So with that, I think we're gonna say bye to everyone, like a happy Pride, right? Bye everyone. Happy Pride.
Bye. Happy Pride.